It is my first ever Victober BookTube TBR. Let's dive into all things Victorian literature. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome to my reading life and welcome to my very first Victober video. This is not my first year participating in Victober, but it is my first year recording a video about it, and I'm very excited to share my quite short TBR, which I will talk to you a little bit about in a moment. And also I'm going to give you a few recommendations of some Victorian novels that I have read and enjoyed. But first off, I want to share a little bit about what is Victober if you're not familiar with it. Victober is a month-long read-along celebration of Victorian literature. If you aren't sure what qualifies as Victorian literature, the hosts of Victober have qualified it as any books written by a UK author between the years of 1837 and 1901. Anything within those parameters qualifies as a piece of Victorian literature. And we have four lovely hosts of Victober. The first is Katie from Katie J. Lumsden's channel. The second is Kate Howe from Kate Howe Reads. The next is Roz at Scallydandling About the Books. And then there is Marissa at Blatantly Bookish. All four of them are the hosts for this year, which I believe is the 9th year of Victober. And they do have some prompts and a group read and all of that. I will have all of their information linked in the video description box, links to their Victober announcement videos, and you can get all the details there. So let us dive into what I am planning to read. I have my favorite Victorian novel mug with me. This seemed appropriate to have Jane Eyre here with me today. It is feeling very fall and overcast and cool here, and I am leaning into all the fall vibes, and this feels like the perfect day to film a Victober video. Grab your beverage of choice and let's dive into some Victorian literature. As I mentioned before, this is my second year participating in Victober. I actually didn't participate last year. October for me last year was really difficult. My father had just passed away and I just wasn't up for reading much of anything. But I did participate in 2022 and I read Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell and absolutely loved it. If you've never read it, I highly recommend it. And I also did a reread of Frankenstein that year, which I had read previously in a Gothic novel class that I took in college, and I listened to the audiobook read by Dan Stevens. I also highly recommend that if you are interested in ever reading Frankenstein. I am a relative newbie to Victober and to Victorian literature in general. I did take a Victorian literature class in college, and I only vaguely remember a few of the books we read. It has been a very, very long time. One of them I'm going to talk about in my recommendations today, but other than that, I really haven't read a lot of Victorian literature on my own. I mean, I've read a few just because of some of the classics that I have read over the years, but it hasn't been something that I've really focused on. And until I had discovered Kate's channel and Katie's channel and realized there was a thing called Victober, I didn't really think about reading Victorian literature with any kind of lens towards looking at it from that specific time period. But I really love the idea of this, and it has prompted me to add some Victorian novels to my collection, to my TBR shelves, to want to read them and enjoy them just throughout the year, because I think Victorian literature is really interesting and there's so much good stuff out there. Now for Victober this year, I am keeping my TBR very, very short. And the reason for that is that October is my birthday month, and it is just a month where I really want to read what I want to read, and I don't want to have a lot of exterior challenges or pressures on myself to have to read something. So I'm really just kind of specific about picking things that I really want to read this year, especially because my October reading last year was just not the best. And I just want to enjoy it. I want it to feel just really cozy and lovely. And so I didn't want to overload myself with a lot of extra books that maybe I'm not quite in the mood for at this moment in time. Very quickly, I will go through the prompts for Victober. There are 4 prompts, one for each of the hosts, and then they have a special bonus prompt, and then they also have a group read. I am not really trying to follow the prompts specifically, though I do think my book selections do fall into some of the prompts that they have chosen, and so that just worked out. But I'm really just picking things that I had wanted to read, and then they just happen to fit what the Victober host had picked for this year. The first prompt is from Katie, and it is to read a Victorian book that plays with form in some way. So the actual form of the novel, something about it is unique. Kate's prompt is to read a book where religion is a component, and even Kate herself has said that pretty much every piece of Victorian literature will deal with religion in some way. It was really important during that time period, so you probably wouldn't have difficulty meeting that qualification. Then Roz's prompt is to experience Victorian drama, either read, watch, or listen to a play. And then Marissa's prompt is to read a book that was published serially. Again, this is another one that is very, very easy to hit this prompt because so many Victorian novels were serialized. If you think about Charles Dickens, Wilkie Collins, a lot of those authors, their works were serialized before they were published in novel format. So you could pick pretty much any large novel and it probably was serialized. And then they do have a special bonus prompt. And this is in honor of 2 booktubers who passed away over the past year. In honor of Jennifer Brooks and Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, the prompt is either to read something written by Wilkie Collins or something written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And both of those authors were favorites of Jennifer and Alice. I haven't really followed either Jennifer or Alice. They were just booktubers that I hadn't really come across when I started my channel yet. And then I did hear about the loss of them both, which is very, very tragic. And so it's lovely that the Victober hosts have chosen to honor them in this way because I think they both were really fans of Victorian literature. And then the group read for Victober this year is to read The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. So if that is something that you are interested in, you could certainly participate in the group read. I think there's a Discord group set up to discuss the group read, and all of that information is in the videos that I will have linked in the description box from each of the 4 hosts, so you can go to their channels and find out all the details there from them. Now let's get into my own personal TBR. The first book that I have on my TBR is actually the pick for October for the Cozy Reader Book Club. And we specifically chose this book because we know we have members of our group who like to participate in Victober. So we thought we would hit 2 birds with 1 stone. And the book we chose for October is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And I am so excited to read this. I have wanted to read The Woman in White and The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins for such a long time. The only Wilkie Collins I've read is No Name, which I definitely recommend. It was a fantastic novel, but I think The Woman in White will be a fantastic and very seasonal pick to read in October. So I'm very much looking forward to this. And if you don't know anything about The Woman in White, I'll read you the little synopsis on the back here. On a moonlit road in Hampstead, Walter Hartwright is accosted by a stranger dressed from head to toe in white. She asks the way to London, and no sooner has Walter directed her than he is overtaken by a carriage in pursuit of the mysterious woman who has evidently escaped from an asylum. From this single incident, Walter unwinds a thrilling story of abduction, madness, false identity, and shameful family secrets. So this is what is considered to be one of the Victorian sensation novels, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And then my second pick for Victober actually falls in with one of the bonus prompts, and that is to read something by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And I have this lovely edition of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, and this is a collection of short stories. I think there are 12 in here. Yes, 12 stories in here. I've read one of the stories in here, The Blue Carbuncle, before, but all of the rest are new to me. And I might see actually if I can find this or one of the other Sherlock Holmes story collections on audio. I know that Stephen Fry reads some of them and that he's really fantastic. So I may do that this month, have it be one of my audiobooks, but I may just dip in and out of this really, I love this beautiful edition. Those are my two selections for my Victober TBR, keeping it very short and sweet. The Woman in White is fairly lengthy, and I think that will definitely keep me busy for Victober this year. And since I had such a short and sweet TBR, I thought that I would give you guys a few recommendations if you are looking for something to possibly pick up either this Victober or next Victober, or just anytime you feel like reading a Victorian novel. I have 5 books that I've pulled off my shelves that I want to recommend to all of you. And the first one matches my mug that I showed you at the beginning of this video, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Anytime anyone asks me what my favorite classic is, Jane Eyre always pops to the top of my mind. And while there are other classics that I probably love equally, I just have such warm feelings towards Jane Eyre. It's such a wonderful story. I love Jane. I just love everything about her. And I'm actually going to be rereading this with a couple of friends in November, and I'm so excited because it has been a very long time since I've read this, and I really feel like it's deserving of a reread so that I can unequivocally say this is still my favorite classic novel. But if you're looking for a fantastic Victorian novel, you cannot go wrong with Jane Eyre. And then keeping with the Bronte sisters, my next recommendation is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I read this a few years ago as a buddy read with my mom, and as you can see, I annotated it quite a bit. This is such a thought-provoking novel. And in this, we follow Helen Graham. She is the mysterious new tenant at Wildfell Hall. And there's all of this gossip about her. She is there at Wildfell Hall alone with her son. We follow Helen's story through the eyes of Gilbert Markham. And this is one of the Victorian novels that is written as a letter to someone else. Oftentimes Victorian novelists used this, I am writing down this account for someone else as a way of legitimizing the story. That's sort of the parameters in which the Victorian novel was often couched, so that you could believe everything that you read in here because it's being told from a secondhand or third-hand account, whatever the case may be. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is so thought-provoking. It feels very ahead of its time with the subject matter that it's dealing with, and I won't say it's the most uplifting novel, so if that's what you're looking for, don't pick this one. But I have some other options for you if you're looking for something more like that. But if you want something that's really going to make you think and something you can sink your teeth into, this is definitely the book for that. My last 3 picks are a little bit more on the lighthearted side, and 2 of them are quite short. So if you want something, I know sometimes Victorian literature can feel like, oh, these big, hefty novels that are going to be very time consuming, but you don't necessarily have to pick something like that. So my next pick is a very light and frothy little read, which I just read earlier this year, and that is 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. And I didn't even realize this was a Victorian novel when I read it, and this is so fun. It's about 3 men, and to say nothing of the dog, which is the subtitle of this book. It doesn't have it on this edition on it. It says on the back, and with the cooperation of several hampers of food and an open boat, the 3 men, not forgetting the dog, set out on a hilarious voyage of mishaps up the Thames. When his characters are not falling in the river and getting lost in Hampton Court maze, Jerome K. Jerome finds time to express his ideas on the world around, many of which have acquired a deeper fascination since the day at the end of the last century when this excursion was so lightly undertaken. And that's exactly what happens. It's just these 3 men. They are traveling by boat down the Thames, and it's just kind of what happens to them on this little holiday that they're taking. And It is very funny, laugh out loud funny at parts, just some of the situations that they find themselves in. But like the back says, it does also kind of delve into some deeper subjects and has some critique on society and the social mores of the time. But again, for the most part, this is a very light read. It's a very slim read. So if you want something more along those lines, I highly recommend this. I thought it was hilarious. And then the next one is another book that I also found very funny. And that is The Diary of a Nobody by George and Whedon Grossmith. So these two brothers wrote this book. It is in diary format. And in this, we follow Mr. Charles Pooter, who is a respectable man. He has just moved into a desirable home in Holloway, and his dear wife, Carrie, from where he commutes to his job of valued clerk at a reputable bank in the city. Unfortunately, neither his friends, Mr. Cummings and Mr. Going, nor the butcher or the greengrocer's boy seem to recognize Mr. Pooter's innate gentility, and his disappointing son Lupin has gone and got himself involved with a most unsuitable fiancé. This is very much a comic novel. And I think actually this was serialized when it first came out. So I think the diary entries were put out in serial format, and then it was collected into a book afterwards. And it is so very funny. If you know Samuel Pepys's diaries, Samuel Pepys is a famous diarist, and this reminded me a little bit in part of Pepys and what his diaries are like. So if you've ever read those, that might give you a little bit of an inclination as to what you're going to get here. But I think this is one of the forerunners of many, many books that were written in diary format in the future. And it is hilarious. I mean, as you can tell by the names Mr. Cummings and Mr. Going, what more is there to say? This is a very light, frothy little novel in diary format, and kind of just a bit of a slice of life. And, you know, it kind of everything gets wrapped up a little bit neatly at the end. And again, very slim, very quick read. If you want something on the lighter side, I highly recommend this one. And then my last recommendation is a very, very famous book. Actually, my edition contains the two books in this series, and that is Alice in Wonderland. So this is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. Obviously by Lewis Carroll. I think everybody knows Alice in Wonderland. And this is the Boddington Penguin Classic Edition. I love this with all the little teapots, tea kettles on the cover. So fun. I have read Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass a few times over the course of my life. This is one of the books I studied in my Victorian literature class, and was really, really interesting to study this as a work of literature with a critical lens. And if all you know of Alice in Wonderland is the Disney movies, then this will be an eye-opener for you. It's very much the same story, but Lewis Carroll is doing something very interesting here, and I think it is well worth a read. Really, really fun. And again, because this is two novels in one. So Alice in Wonderland itself, actually Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, is not that long of a book. So if you need something a little shorter, this is another good one. Those are my 5 recommendations. Again, I am no expert in Victorian literature. These are just a few things that I have read and enjoyed, and I thought I would pass them along to you if you need something to add to your TBR. And that is it for my Victober video. This is really fun. I'm excited to be participating this year. And I'd love to know from you in the comments, are you planning to participate in Victober? Do you enjoy reading Victorian novels? And do you have a favorite Victorian novel? I would love to hear that. I'm always looking to add things to my TBR. Thank you so much for watching this video, liking and subscribing and commenting, and I'll be back with another video very soon. Bye.